They are going to be talking to you tonight about the sensory supports to assist students learning with their technology. So it's all about AT and sensory tonight. And these two occupational therapists are extremely great at what they do. So we're going to learn a wonderful amount of information. And now that I've really hyped you guys up, I can see you there. You're going to flip to your learning objectives before you introduce yourselves.
I have to. All right. So our learning objectives are that the participants in this meeting are going to be able to recognize which tools presented are going to impact which different sensory systems. That you'll be able to identify 2 to 3 tools that you can use immediately to assist your students with accommodating their sensory needs with technology, and that you will increase your own comfort level with the various tools that you're able to use that impact students' sensory systems.
So in order to be able to talk about tools and strategies for sensory, we have to make sure that you understand sensory. So we're going to start there, and we're going to integrate all of the sensory systems into our discussion today. When we look at sensory, we look at how our bodies take information in through the 8 sensory systems. Now we know that the typical 5, eyes, nose, mouth, ears, touch are typical 5. Most of you are aware of the vestibular and proprioception, which is 7, and we're going to add on to the sensory systems interoception. So we'll be talking about all 8 systems today. We take in information, we process it, we interpret it, we try to give meaning to it, and then we figure out what to do with it. We respond. Regulation is being able to respond in ways to meet the environment. So we might be excited in one environment, but that excited is not appropriate in another environment. So it's figuring out where that level of alertness needs to be in that environment. When we break down sensory, we break it down into 2 different areas. Discrimination, which is how we interpret or we give meaning to that sensory input. So if you put your hand in your pocket and you feel coins, can you interpret a quarter versus a nickel versus a dime versus a penny? And then how we modulate or how we respond to that input. Do we over respond by screaming and crying when we hear a siren, or do we under respond, meaning we might be seeking more input in order to be able to really interpret that information? So we're going to start with the visual system. We're not going to go into details regarding all the information and how the sensory systems work. We're giving you generals because we want to bring it back to technology. So the visual system allows us to see and process visual information. When we look at discrimination, Kathy, you're doing great.
You are.
When we look at discrimination, these are kids that are really struggling to be able to copy from the smartboard or from the chalkboard or whatever you're using, books to your computer, to the laptop, to their Chromebook, to their iPads. They can't bring that information down. They might have difficulties with their mazes, puzzles, visual perception type activities. Even as they get older, they still have those reversals. Not only the D, P, Q, G, but they might be reversing the 7s and the 9s and the N's. So you're seeing that reversals that they're struggling still with as they get older. And then they're struggling with seeing the difference between some of those, the 1s and the L's and the I's that look very similar, but they can't really discriminate between the differences. There are also the kids that are really struggling with the alphabet. So when we look at strategies for the visual discrimination system, readability is one of those big components. Readability is being able to clear up the page. So you are able to remove the ads. You're able to simplify the text. You're able to really clean up and simplify a page for kids to be able to see. So they don't have all those other distractions. If you look at the word strategies up above, you see that the A is made and the G are not made similar to what we would write. So in elementary school, using Roman times is not applicable because the letters are not the same. So you want to use fonts that make sense to the kids. If you see over on the side of the screen, the quick brown fox jumps over the lazy dog, that's dyslexic font. That has been really successful for some of our kids because it really grounds it to the page. You see the heavier base on those words. If you look at sizes and shapes, and I know, sorry, Kathy, I'm going to use you for an example, but we tend to highlight, we tend to put words and colors that we want people to see, that we want kids to see, but we have to know that those colors are effective. Because if you put it in red, Kathy can't see red. So some of our kids, you might be highlighting certain vocab words or certain colors, and they're not seeing them because they can't see those colors. So you have to know your students. We also can use overlays and highlights. Again, emphasizing certain words, emphasizing vocabulary, emphasizing what is specific to those kids' needs, what they need to know. So our middle school and high schoolers, if they aren't able to take those notes, you can actually give them the notes through the Chromebook, through your iPad, and their job is to highlight what they think is critical, or those vocab words or those statements that make that they think are critical for that assignment or that lecture. And then the last one underneath is that word prediction, and we're all familiar with word prediction. But word prediction is really good for those kids that either have physical limitations, so it cuts out some of those physical demands of typing everything in. But it also helps with those kids that really struggle with spelling and really struggle with the physical piece of typing everything out. And you'll see as we talk about vestibular and proprioception that some of those kids really need some of that additional support to shorten up their ability of having to type everything out.
So the next piece we're talking about is the modulation of the visual system. And again, this modulation is the brain taking in that information, how much of the information they can take in and tune into at any one time. So students who have an over-responsive visual system don't like those bright lights or the sunlight or even the screen light that's coming off of their iPads or their Chromebooks. They might cover their eyes or squint. They're the ones that kind of avoid that direct eye contact and kind of look at you out of the side. And they sometimes complain about headaches or nausea after that continuous visual stimulation for using a tablet or a computer. And then on the other side, there's the under-responsive system, and they're the ones who are seeking out that input. So they stare at those brighter flickering lights. So the fluorescent light, which is kind of burning out and flicking, that'll catch their attention and they'll stare at it. Or the classroom fan in the corner of the room, they'll be looking at that and watching it spin and spin. They look at items really close up to see those pixels on the computer or the iPad, and they love all of those programs where it's like the color changing and you can draw and it changes in the color. Or they're the ones that zoom through all of the videos just to get all that visual input and not actually get any information from what they're watching. So now what we're going to do is we're going to talk about the strategies for modulation. And the first thing I really need to talk about is glare. So one of the things that I always give my students is choice. So when we walk into my therapy room, the first thing I ask them is lights on or lights off. It's always their choice because I need to respect what their visual system is telling me. Glare comes from not only overhead lights, but it comes from the natural light through the windows. And it also comes from the light from your iPad and your Chromebook. You know, the kids who are making faces into their iPad and their Chromebook and they don't even have their camera turned on, but they could see that self-reflection. That's the sort of glare I'm talking about. So when you consider the glare, make sure that you're using the iPad kickstand to kind of eliminate that, that you're experimenting with the tilt of the monitor on your Chromebook or your iPad, that you're adjusting the blinds, that you're looking at the different places, not only within the classroom that the student learns, but within the school building itself. Because thanks to COVID, we're doing a lot of online learning, and they're moving with their devices all over the building into many different areas. And one day it might be cloudy, but the next day it could be really sunny. So you constantly have to be assessing, hey, can you guys see this okay? There's also something called a matte screen protector, and you can get it on Amazon, and that does a really great job. It's got this layer that filters out the natural light and the fluorescent light, along with self-reflection. And in addition to that, it kind of negates the appearance of the fingerprints and the smudges on the iPads and the Chromebooks. So that's a really good thing to look into. The other thing that you can talk about with glare is, with your administration's blessing, you can have your students wear light colored sunglasses, or you can have them wear hats with brims, or even hoods that come up and at least cover a little bit of their eye. And that might be enough to negate that glare factor and allow them the ability to visually attend to their device. You can also change the color of their screen or background, and that's something that you can play with in any different format, and you can find it under accessibilities. You can also do alternative mouses or cursors. So on the slide, there's a picture of the Chester mouse, and it's just a single click mouse instead of a left and a right. And that helps take down that whole, like, okay, where's my mouse? Where is it going? What side am I clicking on? It's that visual eye-hand coordination. The alternate cursor you can find in accessibilities, and you can change the size of the cursor, the color of the cursor. You can highlight around the cursor. You can make things visually easier for the student to find. Stickers over a keyboard can be very helpful. So just like Deb had talked about, some font is difficult. Well, keyboards, there are white letters on black, pretty much always background. Yeah, so you can get stickers, again, online is the easiest place and the cheapest place. And you can have black and white, you can have yellow on gray, you can play around with how those keyboards look visually and make it easier for your student to locate the letters. Blue light is something I need to talk about, because there have been a lot of studies and a lot of news reports about how blue light affects eye health and affects your circadian rhythm and sleep, and how they're saying that you need to not use devices for an hour before you're going to go to sleep, because the blue light is actually stimulating and it's giving your body the wake up message, like wake up, wake up, wake up. So on the devices, what you can do is, in Chromebooks, what you can do is you can go to the accessibilities and you can turn on the night setting. And in the iPad, there's color filters you can turn on and off. And in our references, I've included YouTube links so that you can click on that and see how to do that. Apps and extensions, Deb has already mentioned. Readability, that reduces the visual clutter. There's also Mercury Reader for Chromebooks and AdGuard for iPads. All you have to do is Google, basically, how do I remove the visual clutter, and it will let you know. And that really helps. So for those students who are doing research projects and they're going online and they're looking up dogs, and then all of these ads come up, then they kind of go down rabbit holes, right? They start clicking on ads. So if you use these apps and extensions that reduce that visual clutter, you're directing their visual focus to what they're supposed to be on. Another thing I want to talk about is, when one system is challenged, consider supporting the other sensory systems. So if your visual system is challenged and it's super hard already for you to visually locate, and you've got those letter reversals going on and there's glare going on, you could always do auditory output program, and you can listen to something read to you, or you could do speech to text, and instead you can dictate and then have it type. So for those students who have clear enough speech, they would be able to just talk, and they need to be taught. So you need to be taught punctuation. So at the end of your sentence, you have to say speech to text, period, new paragraph. So you do need to teach them those strategies, but boy, once they catch on, they really launch and fly and their writing takes off.